On June the 14th, 1986, disaster struck at a mall in West Edmonton when a man named Rod Chayko was flung from a ride that had just opened known as the Mindbender. Little did he know, as he lay in pain on the floor, confused as to what just happened, he was the lucky one. What happened that day would go down in history as one of Canada's worst roller coaster disasters. So, how did the quote-unquote world's safest roller coaster lead to the death of 3 people? This is the infamous story of the Mindbender roller coaster disaster. When the Mindbender opened on the 20th of December 1985, it was truly one of a kind. The ride was designed and created, for the most part, by Anton Swartzkopf. Anton was an amusement ride manufacturer, specialising in roller coasters, which were sold to parks around the world. In 1984, he was contracted by 555 to build the Mindbender, but according to the July 23rd, 1986 edition of the Windsor Star, he was fired before the ride was completed due to financial trouble. It states Swartzkopf was fired early in the construction of the Mindbender ride, which was not complete until late 1985. By then, a receiver had taken over and finished building the roller coaster. $6 million later, the ride was finally finished. Mindbender stood at an intimidating 145 feet, making it the tallest indoor roller coaster in the world. The ride featured trains which each had 4 cars. Each car had 2 rows. 2 people could sit in the front and 2 people could sit in the back. It features 3 loops and many twisting drops as the rider travels around at 60 miles per hour. At the time, the only restraint on the ride was a lap bar. This brings us to June the 14th, 1986, a few months after the ride's opening. It was an ordinary afternoon, which saw Rod Chayko and his 24-year-old best friend David Sager visit West Edmonton Mall to ride the Mindbender. Previously in the day, the ride had been shut down twice due to ride operators hearing a strange noise coming from one of the trains. Each time they called ride maintenance, who couldn't find an issue, so the ride operators were told to keep the ride open. Rod and David sat in the back seat of the last car, number 1. In the same car in front of them sat 24-year-old Tony Mandrusiak and his 21-year-old fiancée Cindy Sims. The ride set off and was going as expected until they came up to the 3rd and final loop. At this point, out of nowhere, the left wheel of the 4th car became detached. This then caused the back car to detach from the track. As the cars in front were still attached and going down the track, the back car started swinging wildly, swaying back and forth. This damaged the car, which led to the lap restraints to unlock and release, which hurled the 4 individuals out of the car onto the concrete floor below. The train continued forward, but couldn't make the last loop due to loss of momentum. The passengers in cars 2, 3 and 4 all survived, but suffered neck injuries after their evacuation. Unfortunately, the others weren't so lucky. The crash resulted in the deaths of David Sager, Tony Mandrusiak, and Cindy Sims. Rod Chayko was alive, but seriously injured. He wasn't found for over 15 minutes, but when he was rushed to hospital.
World's largest indoor roller coaster. They call it the Mindbender. But the Fantasyland ride turned into terror for 16 passengers. They were traveling at more than 100 kilometers per hour, picking up speed, going into the final series of 360-degree loops when tragedy struck. 3 of the 4 passengers in that final car were suddenly tossed out. The undercarriage was gone. The train careened forward, still on the tracks, dragging the final car. The emergency brake was then finally applied.
Stopped dead.
And then what happened?
And then just sat there and waited for help.
Well, you could feel something going bang, bang, bang all the way down it, and you didn't know what was happening because it was shaking a lot.
Rod's legs were shattered, his feet, pelvis, ribs and lower back were broken, and his left shoulder was crushed. But he was alive. He stated, "I remember feeling it sway and grabbing onto the handle. The next thing, I was on the ground. I tried to stand up at first, but when I tried, all I saw were my knees. I saw my legs were pointing in the other direction. I tried to sit up, and that's when I realized I had a punctured lung. I couldn't breathe." It wasn't until 3 days later that he learned his best friend was dead. After he was told, he cried. He said he enjoyed his life and lived it to the fullest. He was a good person. Mindbender was closed after the incident, and an investigation was launched. The investigation found that the Schwarzkopf company who manufactured the ride had problems from the start. It started with bad translation. The company struggled to understand English, which didn't help the design process at all, especially in regards to maintenance information. They also found issues with quality control. More importantly, they found 4 screws which held the wheels onto the tracks failed, which significantly weakened its connection, causing the car to detach. Ride maintenance failed to repair this. They also found that inspections were done visually rather than manually. The blame was put on 555 for failing to maintain the coaster and the Schwarzkopf company for design flaws. Chayko then received an undisclosed fee, which clearly wasn't a lot, as he commented, "I'm famous, but I ain't rich." The Mindbender was then closed for a year, and the trains were redesigned. Wheels were added to each car, and additional safety restraints including a seatbelt and shoulder restraint was added. They also converted the 4 cars into 3, reducing the capacity from 16 to 12. Since then, the safety record has been impeccable, and there have been no further deaths. After the incident, it took Rod 6 months to walk properly again, but he went on to marry his girlfriend and father 4 children. However, he still lives with the pain 30 years on. He said, "David, Tony, and Cindy are dead, and it changed my life forever. I think about it every day." He described his friend David as being a thrill seeker who loved life, just a fun guy to be around. Rod has requested over the years that the mall build a memorial bench near the Mindbender, but I couldn't find if his request has been completed yet. The mall did offer to put up a plaque on the wall, but Rod said this wasn't good enough. He is still hopeful the mall will change their mind. Unfortunately, I couldn't find much information on Tony or Cindy, but I know they were going to get married and had their whole lives ahead of them. Tony's mother did claim that no one from West Edmonton Mall ever got into contact with her. To this day, she still doesn't look at the building, as it brings back awful memories. I don't normally bring my opinions into the videos, but quite frankly, I find it disgusting that no one ever reached out to her. I also hope that the mall fulfilled Rod's request and put a proper memorial up for the 3 victims who lost their lives that day. If anyone knows if they ever did, please leave it as a comment and I will pin it to the top of the video. I'm glad Rod is doing better today, and I hope if the victims' families see this video, they are doing better also. As always, thank you for watching.
It was an accident. I have no hatred or ill to West Edmonton Mall. I would like to have a plaque just to say, always in our hearts, David, Tony, and Cindy, just a bench for people to sit on and reflect on life.